With rue my heart is laden, for golden friends I had, for many a rose-lipped maiden, and many a light-foot lad. By brooks too broad for leaping, the light-foot boys are laid, and the rose-lipped girls are sleeping in fields where roses fade.
The Celtic people, the Scots, Irish, and Welsh, have an old proverb that says it's simple to get over a wall. Simply throw your heart over the wall and then follow your heart. Einstein, on his deathbed, startled the people in the room beside him who expected his last words to have something to do with deep scientific principles, such as his theory of relativity, right? But he said, there's really only one important question. And he paused and said, is the universe friendly? I'm going to try. Ursula Le Guin said, in life, it is good to have a goal, an end to journey toward. But in the end, it is the journey that matters. A trained hunting dog is goal-driven. If you're interested only in dead birds, follow your mind, the trained hunting dog. But if you want an interesting journey, follow your heart, the mongrel that is interested in everything. The older I get, the more I tend to take walks with the mongrel. But we need both dead birds to eat and living birds to keep our sense of wonder alive. If you've listened to me tell a story, you know that my mind is a mongrel. It trails off here and there. I'm going to try to put a little more shape and direction on this to keep a kind of leash on the mongrel, but I can't promise that I will succeed in this. This is Robert Applegate. I'm 67 years old, and it is just at 9 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday, August, what is it now, 10th? These are not the ideal circumstances that I would choose for recording of this, and it's been difficult. I've been up since 4 o'clock, which has given me all the days that I've been here so far about 2 or 3 hours of privacy. This morning I got up at 4 o'clock, and I've only now found privacy in the time where I won't be disturbed and I won't disturb others to try to put this down on record. Some of the things that I'm going to say are factual, dead birds that are nailed down. Some of what I'm going to say is simply what the heart knows and what the heart is leading me toward. So, if I can remember the general framework of what I was talking about the family and the name Applegate, I would suggest that you can follow some leads here, some hints. I think that pretty soon a great many facts are going to be nailed down. I talked with you about K. Applegate, who was K. Applegate, who says that he now has on disc all the dead birds, in effect, that we can find about the Applegate family, which is, in terms of names, it's a relatively uncommon name, and it's one that probably easier to find all the birds eventually than it is if your name is Smith or Jones, for example. In any case, The first of the Applegates, as far as I've been able to find out historically, that came to this country, that is to the west, was Jesse Applegate, and he was traveling with his two brothers, Philip and Lindsay, if I remember correctly. They traveled the Oregon Trail in 1845 or 46, and Jesse later wrote a book of reminiscence about this first journey called A Day with the Cow Column. It can give you some interesting facts about the family and its name. And the Applegates became later trail breakers. That is, they not only went out to Oregon early on, but they came back and they tried to find better ways of getting to Oregon. Didn't always find the best way, but they did have interesting journeys. Early on in my life, I had an interest in Indians. As I told you, all of the Indians that I've ever met, the old Indians, that is, the parents and the grandparents of the Indian classmates that I went to school with, and I had Indians, full blood and mixed blood, as classmates in every class I've ever taken, and I've taken a good many over the years. But the classmates of my age, the younger Indians, were interested in being white men. That is, they wanted to be cowboys, not Indians, and they wouldn't share any of their language or Indian background because that was the old foolishness that their parents and grandparents were interested in. And so to find the things I wanted to find, I went to the old long hairs, to the parents and to the grandparents. Early on, these parents and grandparents would inevitably say, when they met our mother, they would say to her and to all of us kids who were interested, your mother is Indian. Or they would say to her face, you're an Indian. We would ask Mom about this, and she would deny it, but I suspect that there was a truth there that the Indians were onto, that my mother's family had hidden. So on the mother's side of the family and on father's side of the family, I speculate that there is Indian blood. The Applegate name, as I showed you, is on the South Dakota map on the Lower Brule Indian Reservation at the Big Bend of the Missouri River. On the east side of the river is the Crow Creek Indian Reservation. Those people are mostly Santee, that is Eastern Sioux, Dakotas, and Nakotas. Those people on the west side of the bank are Brule, that is Sichungu in the Lakota, the Burnt Thigh people. They're the same people as the people on the Rosebud where I was born and raised and brought up. The old-timers would frequently say to me, your folks got land up on the Lower Brule. And when I asked people about it, a great many white people would tend to dismiss anything the Indian said as, oh, that's just some Indian BS. Well, I persisted and finally found a map in the last few years, the Delorme map of South Dakota, that is in enough detail that it shows the name of Applegate on the Lower Brule, which was about the first, I believe, the very first reservation to be established on the west side of the river. And white names that appear on the map there indicate that there was a white person, most likely married to an Indian, who was the main known residence of that area to which the name was applied. Here in the Rosebud, if you look at a South Dakota map, you'll find that especially to the eastern part of the reservation, which once extended all the way from the boundary with the Pine Ridge Reservation up to the White River and clear down to and meeting the Missouri River. But gradually this land was taken away from the Indians by a process called allotment. The Dawes Act, which came about the end of the last century and the beginning of this century, was passed to persuade the Indians, as many as possible, to take individual allotments, as the white homesteaders would later do, of land, and they would be given all the good things that the whites were bringing up the river. That is, a horse, a plow, a team of horses, a plow, a wagon, an iron cast stove, whiskey, and all the other goods of civilization. So the lands to the eastern half of what was once the reservation became the allotted lands. And when I, years ago, had to do a title search of all of the whole of the land in Tripp County, the allotted lands, back to their source, you find almost inevitably the first name of ownership was an Indian name. Sometimes, if it was not an Indian name, it was the name of a white who had married into the Indian tribe. And there were, for the most part, French and Scottish names, but occasionally a name that is English in origin, such as Applegate. The if you're interested in researching the family name, I suggest you probably have to go to a good library and see if you can enter a library loan. I don't believe the book's in print anymore, and I don't own a copy myself of Jesse Applegate's journal of his adventures as being one of the earliest whites on the Oregon Trail. A Day with the Cow Column. There is in southern Oregon a whole section that's known as the Applegate. There's a little town of Applegate, and there's a river named Applegate. If you look on a large enough scale map of Oregon, you'll check these out. You have to have a map sort of like the Delaunay map of South Dakota that we were looking at. There's an interesting book called Sukkums, if I remember right, written by a Shannon Applegate, a woman of about my age and about as far removed from the Applegates of 1845 as I am. But you'll get a lot of interesting suggestions and leads to follow concerning the Applegate family, because she traced, and she has a family tree in there, as much as she could nail down about the Applegates who were the first across this country, Jesse and his two brothers. There are some more useful books to read. I have probably as good a collection of books that are still in existence in print, and some which are no longer in existence in print in my library. I've collected books all of my life, primarily as tools, not as investments for money. And if I had access to them, I could refer to some of those titles. If you're interested, and I can dig through the layers because many of them are buried in boxes and so forth, and can find them, I'll try to give you a list of useful titles to follow. I once had a map that traced the Applegate Trail, and it was named as such. And it was one that I first found access to that wasn't available to the general public. And it came about because I was a ranger of the National Park Service, and one of my best friends who recruited me into the National Park Service as a ranger had remained on permanent status after we both graduated from college as a historian with the National Park Service, and his specialty was the Western Trails, the Oregon Trails. And while he was stationed down at Scotts Bluff National Monument, he had access to a great deal of unpublished material, print and visual material, maps and books and journals and diaries, a great deal of which still hasn't been released to the public, but more has since. There is somewhere, or was somewhere, a roll-out color map documenting the Western Trails, and it used to be available to the public not too many years ago at the Scotts Bluff National Monument. There's a similar kind of map, and I still have a copy of that somewhere, that documents the trails of the Pony Express. Unfortunately, I can no longer find, and I think it's totally lost for me, my copy of the Applegate Trail. But you can still find evidence of it, visual and in print, in quite a number of books. It takes a little bit of scrolling to find it. If you are interested in following the name and investigating it, and want to keep in touch with me, once I get back home and can dig into some of my collection, I'll try to nail down for you some titles that will be useful leads for you, and try to share with you as much information that is factual, and also give you some hints and speculations that I've been following. So I suggest write me a letter or give me a call if you want to continue the search. I've been interested in this my whole life, and part of my training as a scholar, research scholar, over the years has been directed in areas of interest that are related to finding out this kind of thing. I think I told you about Kay Applegate it once was, who lives in Syracuse, Nebraska, and called me sometime during the past year and continued to call me persistently, trying to find out what I knew about the history of the name, because he is, and he says now, is at the end of a process of searching all that is known about the Applegate name here on the North American continent, and he has some traces of it going back as far as he's been able to trace it into Great Britain. But I've also traced a good deal of that myself, and some of that has been on the ground in Great Britain, where my brother Bill first encountered Applegates and was invited to tea, if I remember, that some people who had seen his name in the paper while he was Army Signal Corps photographer stationed at Briz Norton, if I remember right. He can tell you this, in England. And they insisted, as I was later told by Englishmen, and I have traveled more than once to England, and when I signed my name at small hotels or bed and breakfasts, and people look at it and they say, "Oh, you've got some relatives in this town." And I say, "Oh, I know that." And they said, "Yes, so the baker, the barber, the tailor, or whoever, you should go and talk to him because it's one of your relatives." Any one of these I talked to, and indeed the people who would send me in that direction would say, "Yes, all people bearing the name Applegate are related." Kay Applegate, in the process of his research, has been assisted particularly by three people. A man up in the Twin Cities, another man, another Applegate, down somewhere in the area of Carolinas, if I remember right. And pretty soon, if he sends me the information he promises me in print and on computer disk, I can probably get the names and the addresses of these people. And the third important source for him has been a black woman, Phyllis Applegate, in, I believe, in New Jersey. But Kay says that people bearing the Applegate name come in all racial mixtures, all colors. And once again, there is indeed a relationship. I have never met face-to-face an Applegate who didn't insist that we were directly related, or whom I came to know about whom I came to know that we're directly related. I'm kind of tired, and this is not the best circumstances for recording this. I can't remember precisely what all of I said the other night. I was following my mongrel heart with a great many leads, and as you know, it tends to dart off chasing any scent that comes rather than following you, leading you directly to the bird if you're interested in following the trained hunting dog and only interested in killing birds. That is, if you're interested only in the goal. If you're interested in the journey, if you want to have an interesting life, take a walk with the mongrel. Trust your heart. Keep an open mind. Search for the facts insofar as you can find them, but don't be discouraged if people suggest to you that you're being foolish or that what you have is untrue simply because you've not yet been able to tack it all down neatly with a fact. As I say, the older I get, the more I've been following my heart. If you're interested in some of those quotations with which this tape starts, they were chosen by my heart. My mind is already starting to understand why they were chosen. And if you're interested in that, ask me sometime. I'm running out, basically, of a memory of where that followed the other night. Some of you were listening, I guess, probably better than I was listening to it. I hadn't planned or organized any of that, and so I sort of wove together the various side trails and tracks and digressions that basically following my heart has led me to. And if the mind has trusted and waited and listened to my heart, I think that the facts are out there, and they can, we're coming close to the time when they can definitely be nailed down through through genealogical research. And you younger people have an interesting chance with modern scientific evidence. For example, the human genome research, which through DNA is now possible through the mother's line, mitochondrial. My pronunciation this time of day is probably not good. My memory is